Hello and welcome. Gujarat Chief Minister and Prime Ministerial candidate Narendra Modi has admitted that he was married to Jashoda Bain 45 years ago when he was a minor. That's not the issue here. The issue is that level of transparency that the new elections seem to be bringing on in 2014. The issue is, are candidates being more forthright in what they are declaring or holding back as ever before? Now, the fact about this particular declaration is that there is a Supreme Court judgment which makes it mandatory for all candidates to fill up all columns in a nomination form and not leave anything blank. So perhaps there was no opportunity to hide for any candidate. But the larger issue is, can one expect as voters that this election will see far greater disclosure, far greater transparency in all respects, not just social or personal or private? That's the question that we are addressing here on Hangout today. Thank you for joining me at Cricketwala, Ayaz Memon. He's going to throw some light on this, Ayaz. So let's move beyond that. We're not really interested whether someone is married or was married or is living with someone or not.
Anyway, it was in the public domain.
It was in the public domain.
It's not some state secret. So
correct. So let's talk about what is the and there are a lot of interesting comments which have flown, and I'm going to read some of them shortly. But what's the spirit here that strikes you?
Look, I think the complete disclosure part, as you mentioned, and there's a Supreme Court ruling, has come into effect more forcefully this time than we've ever seen before.
Correct.
And I think it's to the good.
Yeah.
One reason why, just to kind of highlight this case, you need to mention whether you have been married, you have a spouse, is because you also have to declare the assets of the spouse.
Right, absolutely.
So it's not just how much money you have or the assets that you have, but also your spouse.
Yeah.
And therefore, you don't want anything to be left to chance.
Yeah.
In the past, you could have left that column blank and perhaps nobody would have been wiser or wouldn't have cared.
Right.
But now, you can't afford to do it with the kind of surcharged atmosphere.
Yeah.
Why leave anything to chance?
Yeah, so we'll come to that in a second, and let me pick up some comments that have come in. Parag Hede says, well, that's because of the Election Commission. He's technically married but hasn't kept any relationship for 40 years. Is that marriage? Is a question he asks. Well, we are not deciding that. Vijay Raman says, this is the cheapest form of journalism, however, this should help. And then he points us to an article which has the reference to the same Supreme Court mandate. It's from Niti Central, which is a pro-BJP online publication. We've got more. Someone says, what a moronic question. We all know he's married. Do you have a problem with that too? So anyway, to your point that everyone knows that he's married.
Yeah.
Let me get some more points. When did Modi ever deny being married orally or in writing? I'm surprised at the pettiness of you guys. Okay.
Well, he did say, I have no responsibility, so I can look after the country better.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
okay.
In that sense.
And then Amit Parikh points out that because the Election Commission changed the format and now it's online and you can't move forward if it's kept blank, unlike the manual forms, which I thought is an interesting technical input.
Yeah.
And with such forms, obviously, either you have to say yes, no, or whatever. That column has to be filled in, else you can't press next and move to the next aspect, right? So someone, of course, has pointed out that if he was married at a young age, is child marriage a good reason? He says, I think the child marriage is a good reason for us to vote for corrupt Congress again and let India sing deeper. Well, okay, that's not making too much, whatever.
I think that's said ironically, perhaps.
Right. Okay. So let's get into I think we've showcased some of the issues. What's if assuming that things have been more transparent this time around, let's look at the economic side now, right? The richest politician who seems to have emerged, candidate politician who seems to have emerged in this is Nandan Nilekani,
yes.
Right? An IT billionaire from Bangalore. None of the people we traditionally think are the richest and have made money from being in politics.
Yes.
So is there something still wrong?
No, I think it's good. Look, I think what we are seeing in these elections, Govind, is that the absolute and complete disclosure is helping us understand our candidates better.
Right.
Now, leaving aside people getting upset over Mr. Modi's marital status or not, but the fact is that if it is in the public domain, it is always better for everybody concerned, like Mr. Nandan Nilekani's wealth or some of the other people. Because you can also compare with what they are saying and how they are conducting themselves. Ultimately, it's a value judgment that we make when you go and cast a vote. At least the discerning voter.
So, as what is more important? Is it the economic disclosure or is it the social stroke private disclosure which is more important?
I think it's a bit of both, because you could bluff about one or the other, and therefore people may have done it in the past and never been found out, or found out and it's too late. I think this, in the presentation of the candidature, I think they're trying to explore all facets which help make up your mind as a voter as to who you want to choose. So your social status, your marital status, if you are married, does help you understand the candidate a little better, the amount of money your spouse may have, and obviously the wealth you have at your disposal to fight an election or to try and do the kind of work that you promised to do.
Right. So I have an interesting tweet from someone called Marriage 101, which says to find someone who will love you for no reason and to shower that person with reasons, that is the ultimate happiness. I don't know if it's anything to do with our discussion, but so
that's poetry.
That's poetry, exactly. So, you know, coming back to the economic issue, right? Even in the city of Mumbai, we've seen assets being declared. The AAP candidate from South Mumbai, it appears, has the most amount of assets in terms, at least in terms as declared, right?
It's the most interesting party, according to me, in trying to understand it, because you've got people at the extreme ends of the spectrum. So, for instance, in Mumbai itself, you've got Medha Patkar, who's I think disclosed about 2 lakh. And you've got Meera Sanyal, who's disclosed about 50-60 crore, whatever it is. And it's part of the same party, you know. That kind of disparity you don't find in the other parties. So you'll find in the left party, a lot of them have no wealth. In the BJP and Congress, you pretty much know, you know, if you have to find out a mean figure, it's still pretty high. But in AAP, it seems to be like, you know, completely different stools it's straddling.
So are we, okay, so I'll come to the economic point again in a minute, but are we more churlish when it comes to people's private social preferences, marital associations, contracts?
I think we've been very hypocritical in the past. So, for instance, you know, former prime ministers with their kind of relationships they may have had, or ministers, we never talked about it. I think the politicians' public life was enough. The private life was never something which was encroached upon. And so also in business, you'll find that in the business community, people don't talk about private lives of businessmen as much. Maybe that is opening up too. But the churlishness may come in now. I think it's a part of evolution till we then become like some of the West, or most of the Western societies, where this becomes squasher. Everybody discusses everything.
Correct. So, the question, of course, again, there's another one which has come in from Anusha. She says, so Modi admits he's married. Is it going to change anything in the minds of the voters? That's the important question.
Absolutely.
At least at this point of time with elections coming.
I think that's the, I mean, in the Modi case, that's the crux of the matter. Is it going to change his, you know, his people, how they're going to see him? I really don't think so. At this stage, you know, when voting has already begun, 91 seats have gone, yes, it may perhaps make a marginal difference to some people who may have said, hey, I never knew at all. And therefore, is he good or bad? I don't know. But overall, I think people are seeing the candidates for what they've been promising on issues which are far bigger and broader, rather than saying, am I married or not married?
Right. So then let me ask the economic question, right? What happens when you find out that your candidate who you thought is pretty, you know, someone like yourself, myself, it suddenly turns out to be like a billionaire in dollar terms, right? Or multi-millionaire and again in dollar terms. Does that change the way you view a candidate?
It could. It depends on which.
More so than the personal part?
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, if it is a matter of major deceit, I can understand. You don't want to be deceived. So even in terms of money disclosure, you don't want to be deceived by imagining, or somebody is pretending to you that, for instance, I have no wealth, and you suddenly find the disclosure, the guy is extremely wealthy. Then there is a matter of deceit coming in. I think that the money part, if it fits in with the profile of the candidate as he or she has been extolling or telling the people, and it fits in broadly with what the party is also trying to do, then I don't think it will make, it's good to know.
Right. Okay, so let's come to the larger question then, right? So this raises the question of our personal tolerance and acceptance of what is and what isn't, right? We all know that many politicians have been corrupt. Many people accept that politicians perhaps need to be corrupt in order to deliver on their jobs. right? So somewhere is this still within the boundaries of what our levels of tolerance are in terms of what we want our elected representatives to be? So whether it's economic, whether it's private or social, we're just talking about information.
I think it's something bigger and deeper than that, Govind. I think what's happening is that people want to know. There's the urge to know completely and entirely.
Right.
For instance, in Nandan Nilekani's case, now suppose, you know, in the if the disclosure was that he has 70-80 crore, nobody would believe it. Because we all know what he has achieved in his life. So this helps us understand, yes, he is there, he is saying I've got 7,000, 8,000 crore, whatever it is. But and yet, look at it, you know, juxtapose this with the philosophy of the Congress party, which is left of center. And therefore, there is still no great uproar, because I think even in our evolution, political evolution, the way we are moving ahead, we don't seem to find that as a contradiction.
Yeah. No, but is it because his wealth is really from most of it or good part of it from the shares in Infosys or his stake in Infosys?
Self-made.
Self-made.
You know, it's self-earned. It's not some great inheritance that he's got.
Yeah. So then how important is disclosure itself? Whether the law asks for it or whether you do it on your own, whether it's economic or whether it's social?
I think disclosure is very important. I think especially with the way we are situated now, because I think the biggest problem that we've had with our politicians, and that seems to be the big churn, is that they don't tell us the truth. So whether you classify it as corruption, this, that, communalism, whatever it might be,
or selective.
There's a lot of double speak.
Yeah.
The disclosure helps you understanding your, you know, candidate or your politician better to a large extent. Ultimately, we can't get into the person's mind and exactly suss it out.
Sure.
But in terms of status, married, unmarried, children, whatever it is, wealth, businesses, whatever that form entails, I think it helps you understand that person better.
And to that extent, people are making more informed decisions, if at least we think so.
We are in the information age, so every bit of information becomes valuable. Whether how much of value judgment one should assign is a matter of, you know, debate and still open. The jury is still out on that. But I think that every bit of information, when you consolidate it, it paints a certain picture and a portrait, and I think it helps you in understanding.
And this applies in your mind, so you follow cricket a lot, does this apply across the board? Even cricket there are, I mean, quite wide gaps between, let's say, earnings of players, right? Or the people who sit in the board of control for cricket in India, right? Between, let's say, a Gavaskar on one end and some of the other officers bearers on the other hand. So would people like to know, or should they know, what the relative economic status of these people is?
I think people want to know. They like to know. Certainly, there's a vicarious desire. I think people have not been told. Look, Indians,
and we're talking about institutions and so on, which are in the public
space. No, but for instance, the best earning sports persons in the world, their earnings are documented and well known. Except in India. Or film stars, for that matter. Or, you know, big ticket businessmen. It's not. You can know the balance sheet of their companies, but their own wealth, you don't know. I think in India, we've been very conservative about our wealth and about our private matters. And by and large, people have left these issues aside, especially in the political class and the business class, as I mentioned, are all big time cricketers. But these times are now changing because everybody wants to know more. I can't give you so much of my time and my loyalty or my vote without knowing what exactly you stand for.
Right. So let's ask the next question, which is in some ways the sort of the larger final question, is that what is the level of disclosure that we should aim for? What is the next level, and what should politicians and those wanting to or running for office be willing to disclose, whether or not a Supreme Court mandates something or some other court mandates something?
You know, I think essentially it should be about the wealth, because money is the big issue for a candidate as to how much you got, whether it's well earned or not well earned, properly documented, taxes paid, not paid, etc., etc. I think personal matters to me are not as important unless there is, you know,
unless there is some legal implication.
Legal implication, some horrid deceit, you know, a matter of deceit, or, you know, some kind of major upheavals which may have happened in the personal domain, which could impact the way that person behaves in office or in politics, then perhaps yes. But overall,
and for instance, it could be illness, right? I mean,
it could be illness.
Yeah, should you declare that you're ill? I mean, it's a very tricky subject.
It's a tricky subject. Yes, it's a very tricky subject. That's why I think a lot of there's this big call now that once you're 70 or 75, you shouldn't stand for elections, or at least try and aim for a public life, because, you know, there are implications of age and old age.
Right.
But I think if there is first full disclosure which gives basic information of your personal life, I think it's healthy, it's not unhealthy.
Okay. And you're saying that what we have today as a format of disclosure is good enough?
Yes.
For instance, I would feel that there are still holes on the economic side.
Yeah.
I mean, and really,
like what?
For instance, I think can they be? Does it cover all siblings? I mean, all siblings.
Yeah.
Does it cover siblings and their spouses?
Correct.
Right. And I think we know enough politicians where the siblings or sibling spouses are sitting on huge amounts of assets and which don't show up on the
True.
That's one. Secondly, I think it's the quality of disclosure. So if I own
the argument against that, just to emphasize the point, Govind, is that I'm standing for office and not my third cousin
or my son-in-law,
or my uncle or my son-in-law.
Yeah.
So legally, perhaps it's not as because otherwise it can just open up so many things.
So let me give you the other example. Okay, so one is assets I own because I own a building or a certain amount of shares in a company which is listed, right? But in many cases, there are disclosures which were of shareholdings in companies which in turn own property.
Correct.
Right. Whereas what is declared or disclosed is really the face value, which has really no meaning at all. Correct. Because the underlying asset is what is really worth whatever it is worth. So that's something
that's for the investigative journalist to find out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it has been found out.
It has been found out.
Yeah. So anyway, so you're saying that don't bring in drag
or whistleblowers or people who work in bureaucracy and can come up and be brave enough to highlight.
So what we are sort of concluding here is that really economic matters more in some ways. It's good if you disclose. Don't get too people should not get too worked up if personal details are asked for and then subsequently disclosed. Nor is it worth a big discussion. Really doesn't matter to a voter.
Ultimately, in a democracy. The democracy survives or thrives because of the people and the voters.
Correct.
They have the right to know.
Yeah.
So in the past, the equation was the other way around. We'll tell you what is to be done.
Yeah.
I think that has changed completely.
Yeah.
So the more information you have, and we are in the information age, the dissemination of information is so rapid. That's become one of the problems for the politicians.
Yeah.
So I think it's all for the good. Now where it will finally lead to, we don't know, but I think it's for the good.
And it's for the good, and it's and we've got perhaps as we've already talked about, one of the most transparent elections ever, which of course is a healthy trend and something that we should be pressing for in future as well. Thanks for watching this Hangout. We'll be back.